On my first morning at Tri-State, a man named Dale handed me a push broom and told me the bathrooms were a good place for someone like me to start. I took the broom. I said thank you. I went and cleaned the bathrooms. What Dale did not know, what nobody on that floor knew, was that the folder to buy the entire company was sitting on the front seat of the old truck I had parked at the far end of the lot, out by the dumpsters, where the new guy is always told to park. 2 more weeks, and my name would be on the deed to the building he was so proud of running. He had 13 days left to decide what kind of man he was going to be to a stranger he thought was beneath him. He used every one of them. This is the story of how a push broom turned into the worst 2 weeks of Dale Pruitt's career. My name is Russ Kemp. People call me Russ. I am 54 years old, and these days I buy companies. Not glamorous ones, warehouses, parts distributors, fastener suppliers, the unglamorous machinery of how a bolt gets from a factory in one state to a job site in another. I look for tired family businesses with good bones and bad habits, and I buy them, and I fix the habits. I do not look like a man who buys companies. That is on purpose, and it has saved me more money than I can tell you. I wear the same canvas jacket I have worn for 20 years. I drive a truck with 300,000 miles on it. When I walk onto a warehouse floor, people see an aging working man, and aging working men are invisible in this country. And invisible is exactly what I need to be if I want the truth about a place before I sign for it. If you have ever had a boss who mistook a job title for a personality, stay with me, because you are going to enjoy where this goes, and do me a small favor down in the comments. Tell me about the worst supervisor you ever worked under, and whether they ever found out the hard way who they were really dealing with. I read every one. Here is the part Dale Pruitt did not know, and the part you get to know right now, which is going to make the next 2 weeks a lot more satisfying to sit through. Tri-State Fastener and Supply is a family company in Lorain County, Ohio. It was built in the early 1980s by a man named Walter Halverson, who is now 78 years old and ready to hand it to someone who will not strip it for parts. I had spent 4 months looking at his books, his trucks, his customer list, and his loading dock. The numbers were good. The bones were good. But numbers do not tell you the one thing that decides whether a place is worth buying, which is what it is actually like to work there when the owner is not looking. So before I close on a company, I go work in it, quietly. I clear it with the seller. I sign every confidentiality paper their lawyers can dream up. And then I show up at the temp agency's list under an ordinary name, and I become the new guy nobody notices. I push freight. I run a pick cart. I eat lunch where the crew eats lunch. 2 weeks of that tells me more than 4 months of spreadsheets ever could. It tells me who actually runs the floor, who carries the place on their back, and who is a small man with a big lanyard. And there was a lot to read at Tri-State, most of it good. The floor was full of people worth keeping. There was a receiving clerk in her 60s who knew every supplier's quirks by heart and could spot a short shipment before the pallet hit the scale. There were 2 dockmen who moved like they had been partners for years and probably had. There was an order in the way the place ran underneath Dale's noise, a competence that did not come from him and survived in spite of him, the way grass comes up through a parking lot. Walter Halverson had built something real here over 40 years, and his people still carried it out of plain habit. And you could feel that the moment you picked up a cart. That is the thing a spreadsheet will never tell you. The numbers told me Tri-State made money. 2 weeks on the floor told me why. And the why was not the supervisor strutting the aisles. It was a building full of people doing good work because they were the kind of people who did good work. And one spot quietly rotting because a man with a title had been allowed to mistake fear for respect for 11 years. You cannot find that from an office. You can only see it from the floor, in a t-shirt, in the cold. Being called grandpa by the very rot you came to find. I could not tell anyone why I was really there. The deal was not announced until the ink was dry, a confidentiality clause the size of a phone book said I was just Russ from the temp agency, and breaking it could have blown up the whole sale. So I kept my mouth shut and I pushed my cart, which turned out to be a great deal harder than it sounds, for one reason, and the reason was Dale. I should tell you something else, because it matters to all of this. I did not start at the top. 30-some years ago, I was the new man on a floor not so different from this one. 18 years old, slow because nobody had bothered to show me anything, getting ridden by men who thought that was just how you broke a kid in. I was 3 days from quitting. And then a foreman named Gus, a heavy-set man with a bad knee and a soft voice, walked over on my worst afternoon, handed me his spare box knife, a beat-up thing with a yellow handle, and showed me how to break down a pallet without wrecking my back. He did not have to. When I thanked him, he said something I have carried for 30 years. He said, "A man works better when somebody acts like he will be here tomorrow." I still have that box knife. I had it clipped to my pocket the morning Dale handed me the broom. So understand, when I tell you what Dale did, that I was not watching it as an owner doing his due diligence. I was watching it as the 18-year-old who almost walked. I have thought a lot, over the years, about how close that afternoon was. If Gus had stayed in his office another 20 minutes, I would have set down my hook, walked out to the lot, and become a different man with a smaller life. And I would never have known the door I did not walk through. That is the part people miss about a warehouse. They think it is just boxes. It is also 40 or 50 people, each 3 bad days from walking out of their own story. And the only thing standing between them and that door is usually not the man with the clipboard. It is whoever decides, quietly, to act like they will be here tomorrow. I had spent 30 years trying to be that person on my own floors. I did not expect to have to be him again, undercover, at 54, with a broom in my hand. But there we were. Dale Pruitt was the second shift floor supervisor, and he ran his floor like a man who had decided long ago that respect was a thing you took from people below you, since nobody above him was handing him any. He was maybe 40, built thick, with a clipboard he carried like a scepter and a way of saying a man's name that turned it into an insult. He took one look at me on day one. The grey hair, the old jacket, the careful way a 54-year-old body lowers itself to lift, and he made his decision. I was a charity hire. I was somebody's slow uncle the agency had dumped on him. And for the next 2 weeks, he was going to make sure everyone knew it. The bathrooms were just the opening number. After that came the jobs nobody wanted, all of them, every shift. The trash compactor, the returns cage, which is where broken product and broken tempers go to die. The freezer aisle in a t-shirt, because Dale held the jackets in his office and decided who was cold. Whenever a truck came in heavy, Dale would find me. "Grandpa," he would call across the floor, loud, so the crew could hear. "We got a live one on dock 2. Think your heart can take it?" And the younger guys would laugh, because that is what you do when the man with the clipboard is laughing, and you would like to keep your hours. There was one afternoon I will not forget, though I have tried, because it told me everything about both of them. Dale was riding a new dock hand over a miscount, really riding him, the kind of dressing down built to have an audience, and the kid was going red and saying nothing. Marcus set down his scanner, walked over, and said, evenly, that the count had come in wrong from the supplier, that he had flagged it that morning, and that it was not the dock hand's miss. He was right. He had the email to prove it. Dale knew he was right, which is exactly why Dale could not stand it. Dale did not argue the facts. Men like Dale never argue the facts. He just looked at Marcus a long moment and said that some people had a lot of opinions for someone scheduled as easily as he was. And then he moved Marcus off the early shift for the following week. The shift the whole floor knew the kid built his life around. No reason given, none needed. That is how the small power man punishes you. Not for being wrong, but for being right where people can see it. Marcus took the worse schedule without a word and called his mother on his break to tell her he would be late in the afternoons that week. I heard enough of it through the wall to understand what it cost him. and to understand that he had spent it on a dock hand he barely knew. I have met a lot of people who like to talk about character. I was watching a 19-year-old simply have it, at his own expense, on a concrete floor, for no reward he could name. I took it. I said thank you. I cleaned the returns cage until it was the cleanest thing in the building, because the truth was not mine to spend yet. And because I have learned that the fastest way to see exactly who a man is to give him someone he believes he will never have to answer to. By the end of the first week, Dale had developed a particular game, and the game was making me do things twice. He would watch me break down a pallet and stack the product onto a shelf, clean and square. And then he would wander over, run a thumb along the row, declare it wrong, and tell me to do it again. There was never anything wrong with it. That was the point. The point was the crew watching the old man pull apart a shelf he had just built, while Dale stood with his clipboard and explained, slow and loud, how a real warehouse keeps its faces aligned, as if I had not been keeping faces aligned since before he could drive. One afternoon he found me at the end of a long aisle I had just finished, and told me to strip it and rebuild it running the other direction, because he had decided the flow should go the opposite way. It was a full hour of work for no reason any man on that floor believed. I looked at the aisle. I looked at him. I thought about the folder on the front seat of my truck, and how strange it was to stand in a building I was about to own, being told to tear down good work to feed one man's need to be obeyed. Then I said, "You got it," and I tore it down and built it back the other way, square and clean. And I did not give him the flinch he was fishing for. A younger man 2 aisles over caught my eye while I did it and gave me a small look, the kind that says, "I see it. I am sorry. I need these hours." I gave him a small nod back. There is no shame in needing the hours. The shame was all standing by the pick line with a clipboard, and it did not know it yet. There was one person on that floor who did not play along, and I want you to remember him, because he is the reason this story has any sweetness in it at all. His name was Marcus. He was 19 years old. He worked the pick line in Zone 4, and he moved like somebody who had decided that being broke was temporary and being decent was not. I found out later he was putting himself through the community college 2 towns over, taking the early shift so he could sit with his mother in the afternoons, who was sick in a way that does not get better. He never once mentioned any of it on the floor. I only knew because the break room walls are thin and the kid took a lot of quiet phone calls. On my second day, when Dale sent me to the freezer aisle in a t-shirt, it was Marcus who came around the end of the rack 10 minutes later and quietly handed me a spare hoodie out of his own locker. Didn't say a word about it, just here, and went back to his line. On the days my cart got buried, he would clear 2 of my pick tickets between his own without being asked, the way you do when you have decided a coworker is going to make it, whether the boss likes it or not. He shared his lunch with me twice when Dale scheduled me through a break, which is against about 4 laws. But Dale did not care about laws. He cared about who flinched. So that was the shape of it. A petty tyrant with a clipboard, an old temp he had decided to break, and a 19-year-old kid quietly refusing to let it happen. I want to tell you I had a plan. I did not. I had a confidentiality clause and a box knife and 13 days, and I was watching very carefully. The day Dale stopped being a nuisance and became something worse was the day I tried to be useful. Tri-State had a problem I had seen on paper and could now see with my hands. Zone 4, Marcus's zone, was slotted wrong. The fastest moving parts were stored at the far end, so every picker walked an extra 40 feet 100 times a shift, which over a year is a small fortune in worn-out feet and missed numbers. It is the kind of thing that is invisible to a man in an office and obvious to a man pushing the cart. So, one slow evening, I sketched a better layout on the back of a pick ticket. Move the top 40 parts to the front, re-slot the rest behind. 2 hours of work, and the zone would run a quarter faster forever. I made the mistake of showing it to Dale. I thought, in the part of me that still believed a floor should be run well, that he would want it. I handed him the ticket, and I explained it. Plainly, the way one warehouse man explains a thing to another. He looked at it a long moment. Then he told me to mind my cart, that I had been there 4 days and he had been there 11 years, and that the last thing this floor needed was opinions from the temp. 2 days later, the outgoing plant manager came through on his evening walk, and Dale stopped him by Zone 4 and walked him through a brilliant idea he had been developing to improve pick rates. My layout, my pick ticket, recopied in Dale's handwriting. He stood there, in front of the man whose good opinion he was chasing, and he took the one useful thing I had offered, and he made it his. And he did it while I stood 10 feet away restocking a shelf with my mouth shut. The plant manager nodded along, pleased, and told Dale it was good thinking, and Dale soaked it up like a man who had been thirsty a long time. A couple of the pickers caught it. They knew whose sketch it had been because they had watched me draw it on a slow night and walk Dale through it in the aisle. Nobody said anything. You do not, when the man holding your schedule is the one taking the bow. But I saw a loader glance at me, then at Dale, then back at his cart, and file it away somewhere, the way people on a floor file away the difference between who does the work and who collects the credit. Floors keep longer memories than supervisors think. I will be honest with you. That was the first time the sentence climbed all the way up into my mouth. I run a company that owns 4 warehouses bigger than this one. The slotting you just stole is the kind of thing I do in my sleep. It was right there. I swallowed it. I went back to my shelf and I stacked boxes with a great deal more care than the boxes required, and I let the thing settle back down where it could not get me in trouble. Because the timing was not mine yet, and a man who reveals himself to win a footnote loses the whole story. But I marked it. I am a patient man, but I am not a saint, and I marked it. If you are enjoying watching this set itself up, do me that favor I mentioned and drop a comment about the worst boss you ever had. We will get to the part where Dale meets the floor's new owner. First, you need to see how far he was willing to go. Because 2 days after he stole my layout, he went after the kid. Here is what happened, and it matters that you have the order of it right. Because Dale spent a lot of energy later trying to rearrange it. A pallet of high-value control valves came in on Dock 2, the kind of product where one cracked housing eats a week's margin. The right way to store them is single-stacked, and the racking is labeled that way in red, because Walter Halverson is the kind of old man who labels things in red. But single-stacking is slower, and Dale had a quota he wanted to hit to look good for the very buyers he had heard rumors about. And so Dale told the dock crew to double-stack the valves against the rule. I heard him say it. Marcus heard him say it. 2 other guys heard him say it. The top layer came down overnight. $40,000 in cracked housings on the concrete by morning. I came in to find the dock crew standing around the mess like men at a graveside. $40,000 does not sound like much until you see it in pieces on a concrete floor at 6 in the morning. Each cracked housing a part some customer was counting on. All of it now scrap. The dockmen were quiet. Everybody on that floor knew, instantly and without saying it, exactly how the valves had ended up stacked too high against a red label. Because everybody had heard the order the night before. The only question that morning was not what happened, it was who Dale was going to make wear it. You could watch him decide. He walked the wreck once, fast, and you could see him doing the arithmetic frightened men do. The arithmetic that starts at, I cannot be the one who pays for this, and works backward to a name. His eyes went around the dock, and they did not land on the men who had built the stack on his order. They landed on the one person on that floor who made him feel small simply by being decent. Now, a supervisor with a spine walks into the plant manager's office and says, I made a bad call to chase a number. It is on me. Dale is not that man. Dale found Marcus, who had been nowhere near the stacking decision, who had in fact warned the dock crew about the red labels, and Dale wrote him up. A formal disciplinary write-up, the kind that goes in the file, the kind that gets a 19-year-old fired for cause with no unemployment, signed by the supervisor, witnessed by nobody. He told Marcus that the kid had stacked the valves wrong, that it was Marcus's word against a supervisor's, and that everybody knew whose word won. He told him to sign it and be grateful it was not worse. And he did it with a small smile, because he had found someone he believed he would never have to answer to. I was standing at the end of the rack when Marcus came around it holding that write-up, his face doing the thing a proud kid's face does when he is 19 and trying not to come apart in front of a co-worker. He needed that job. The early shift, the schedule that let him sit with his mother in the afternoons, the paycheck that was the only one in his house. All of it was about to be gone over a stack of valves he had warned them not to build. That was the moment I came the closest. I had the whole thing loaded. I am the man buying this company. That write-up is a lie. I heard Dale order the double stack myself, and you are not going anywhere, son. Every word of it true, all of it within my power to make so, and all of it one sentence away. I had my hand on Gus's box knife in my pocket without even knowing I had reached for it, and I stopped. Not because I was afraid for myself, because if I blew it up right there, in a temper, in the aisle, it would be the strange old temp making wild claims, and the deal was not closed, and a confidentiality clause does not care about your feelings, and worst of all, the proof would still need gathering, and a frightened kid would spend 2 more days thinking his life was over for nothing. So I did the harder thing. I put my hand on Marcus's shoulder, and I told him not to sign anything tonight, to ask for 2 days to respond, which is his right, and to trust me that 2 days was all he needed. He looked at me like a man looks at a stranger who is promising him weather, but he held off. He did not sign. Then I went and did the unglamorous work that actually wins these things. I found the dock camera that covered Bay 2 and confirmed it was running and time-stamped. I confirmed the original receiving sheet, in Dale's own handwriting, carried his instruction to double stack. I quietly got the names of the 2 other men who had heard the order. I did not threaten anyone or tip my hand. I just made sure that when the time came, the truth would be standing there with its boots on, ready to go to work. I learned the why of Dale that same night, and I learned it the way you learn most true things, by accident. I had stayed late to finish in the returns cage, and the break room was dark except for one light, and Dale was in there on his phone, and he did not know anyone was close. He was not the man from the floor. His voice was thin and fast. He was talking to his wife. He was telling her that the company was being sold, that he had heard it from a driver, that the new owners always clean house and the supervisor is the first to go, and that he did not know what they would do about the mortgage if it happened. He said he was going to make himself indispensable before the buyers showed up. He said it twice, like saying it could make it true. By the end, he was almost whispering, and Dale Pruitt did not strike me as a man who whispered easily. I want to be straight with you about what that did and did not change. It did not buy back 1 hour of what he had done to Marcus, or 1 ounce of the credit he had stolen, or 1 day he had ridden me across that floor for sport. It did not make me pity him into letting any of it slide. But it stopped me from enjoying what was coming the way I might have if he had simply been a cartoon. He was not a cartoon. He was a frightened man who had decided to feel large by making the people under him feel small. And he had picked the worst possible 2 weeks to do it. And he had picked the worst possible old temp to do it to. The fear was real. So was the cruelty. A man is responsible for what he does with his fear. I closed on Tri-State Fastener and Supply on a Friday morning. By that afternoon, I was no longer Russ from the temp agency. I was the owner of the building, the racking, the trucks, and the payroll, including 1 second shift supervisors, Walter Halverson wanted to do the handover properly, the old-fashioned way, on the floor, with the people. So at the end of that day's shift, he had the crew gather by the dock, the whole floor, pickers and loaders and dockmen. Marcus near the back with his write-up still unsigned in his locker, and Dale up near the front, freshly shaved, in his good shirt, holding his clipboard, ready to meet the buyers he had spent 2 weeks preparing to impress. Old Mr. Halverson thanked his people. He told them the company was in new hands and that he had chosen those hands carefully. And then he said he wanted them to meet the man who was going to take care of the place now. I stepped up from the side, in a clean shirt, with a yellow-handled box knife clipped to my pocket. I have walked onto a lot of floors. I have never heard one go that quiet. Dale's face did several things in a row, and not one of them was anything he could use. I watched him try to fit the broom and the freezer aisle and the word grandpa into the man Walter Halverson had just called the new owner. And I watched the math come out wrong every way he tried it. Somewhere in the middle, a loader said, real low, "That's the temp," and the whole floor seemed to exhale at once. I did not gloat. There is no need. And after 30 years, I find I have lost the taste for it. I just did what an owner is supposed to do on his first day, in front of the people it actually mattered to. I thanked them for 2 weeks of honest work, and I told them I knew the floor better than they might expect. I said the Zone 4 slotting idea that had been making the rounds was a good one, and that since I was the one who had sketched it on the back of a pick ticket my first slow evening, I would be glad to finally see it built. I let that sit exactly long enough. Then I said that a write-up had been put in a good worker's file this week for damage that worker did not cause, and that I had already pulled the dock footage from Bay 2 and read the receiving sheet, and that the instruction to double-stack those valves against the red labels was in the supervisor's own handwriting, witnessed by 3 men standing in this group right now. I said the write-up was void as of that moment, and I tore it in half where everyone could see. And I watched a 19-year-old kid in the back remember how to breathe. I did not scream at Dale. I did not fire him on the spot in front of the crew, as much as part of that aisle 18-year-old wanted to. I told him, plainly, in a voice the floor could hear, but that I kept level, that he was no longer the supervisor of anything. That he would be working the floor like everyone else, while he decided whether he could learn to run one without standing on people. And that the first man he would be answering to was the kid he had tried to get fired, because I was making Marcus the new Zone 4 lead that night. I told Dale that was more of a chance than he had given anyone in 2 weeks, and that he could take it or leave it. He stood there holding his clipboard like it had gotten very heavy. He did not say a word. For once, neither did anyone laugh. I will spare you the bookkeeping that came after, because the satisfying part of a thing like this is never the paperwork. Dale worked the floor for about a month, quiet, and then he took a job at a warehouse across the county where nobody had watched him meet the new owner. And I let him go without a fight, because a man deserves the chance to be different somewhere he is not the punchline. Last I heard, he is a line worker there, and the men who train him say he is fine. And I choose to take that as the story turning out the way Gus would have wanted, rather than the way I wanted on the worst afternoon of it. Marcus runs Zone 4 now, and he runs it the way he picked it, like the people on it are going to make it, whether anyone bets on them or not. We rebuilt the slotting his first week. The valves are single-stacked, every one of them, under labels he had repainted in red, a little brighter than they needed to be, which I have never once mentioned to. On my last evening, before I handed the floor to my regional manager and got back in the old truck, I found Marcus by his line, and I took Gus's box knife off my pocket, the beat-up yellow one that had ridden through 30 years and the worst 2 weeks of Dale Pruitt's career, and I put it in the kid's hand. I told him where it came from, and I told him the only thing the man who gave it to me ever asked, which is that he find the next slow, new kid on his floor someday and act like that kid will be there tomorrow. Marcus looked at the knife, and then at me, And he did not make a speech, which is how I knew he understood it. People asked me whether the look on the supervisor's face was the good part. The moment the temp turned out to own the building, I tell them the truth. The look was fine, but the good part is a 19-year-old kid standing in the middle of his own zone, holding an old man's box knife, already watching the door for whoever comes in next, looking lost. That is the part that pays for the broom. If you made it all the way here, you already know what I'm going to ask. Tell me about the worst boss you ever had. The one who mistook a lanyard for a life, and whether they ever found out who they were really talking to. Subscribe so the next quiet man in the old jacket finds his way onto your floor. And if somebody once handed you a hoodie across a freezer aisle when they did not have to, go find them and say thank you. Some of them are the only reason the rest of us made it to tomorrow.